Welcome to the Hot Cage Podcast presented by CageWall.com. This is the podcast for March 8th, 2013. The subjects we will discuss this week include but are not limited to the development of the Fox Sports 1 channel, the economics of New York MMA, and Mark Hunt turning down the fight with Junior Dos Santos, all from a financial perspective with our guest Jason Cruz from MMAPayout. We will also discuss Tough 17, the GSP conference call, and Mark the Hammer Coleman retiring from MMA. Let's get this podcast started as we do every week by me welcoming in my tag team partner, as always, TJ Craig. TJ, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, John. A week kind of was had some bananas in there and on some conference calls. It was a great week. It wasn't boring at all. I'm ready to start talking.
You know, we kind of talked about this before we got into things here, that in a week with no UFC fights, I mean, obviously there were fights, but no UFC fights, it was kind of crazy how busy of a week it was. It was, like you said, it was kind of insane. So let's bring in our guy to kind of sort out all the insanity of the week from a financial perspective. He is the prolific writer from MMAPayout. You can follow him on Twitter at MMAPayout, at Dilettante, the one, the only, Jason Cruz. Jason, how are you?
Thank you for having me, guys. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Let's get right down to business. Jumping into the flurry, the UFC announced, or actually Fox announced this week that they're going to start with Fox Sports 1. It is their way to compete with ESPN. Ultimately, there will be a Fox Sports 2. My understanding in this is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that Fox Sports 1 will replace Speed Network, and Fox Sports 2 ultimately will replace Fuel. So my big question for you initially is, not a lot of people watch Speed, and a few more watch Fuel. If you're going to replace those two channels with these new two channels, does that make sense financially if you're Fox?
I think that Fox has been planning this for a while. Definitely, when it entered into negotiations with the UFC, that was their long-range plan. They needed to secure a lot of sports content with the goal of eventually competing with the ESPN. And so definitely they have already cautioned their shareholders that it's going to be a significant investment, which you could read into as we're going to lose money in the next couple of years. But they think in the end when they will have enough content to support these two channels and definitely compete with the ESPN. So the UFC definitely it has a place within Fox's cover of sports, and it'll definitely play a role for Fox Sports 1.
Okay, and I guess to kind of expound on this, what I'm wondering is, from the UFC's perspective, when the UFC kind of did the deal with Fox, it was kind of in their best interest. They kind of went from Spike, which is the minor leagues, to Fox, which is the big leagues. Now, in a sense, they're sort of regressing because they're taking on this channel that is, I mean, the point that I'm trying to make here is that Fox Sports 1 potentially may need the UFC more than the UFC needs Fox Sports 1, because in their best world, I've always thought that the UFC's kind of positioning themselves with that Tuesday night slot for Tough to be there right with Sons of Anarchy. That's what I think they've quietly been like, we want to go on either before or after Sons of Anarchy. So it hasn't really been decided yet if they're going to leave FX for Fox Sports 1, but that seems to be the writing on the wall, correct?
Well, actually not necessarily. I think one of the things that did not come out of the announcement was that they don't know yet where Tough will end up. The original thought was all sports programming would come off of FX and move over to Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2, but Tough is technically not sports, it's reality television, I guess you could say. And so it may still stay on Tuesday nights. That's still yet to be seen as far as what will become of that reality series.
I got to add something in there. With the Fox Sports going to this, you know how ESPN doesn't really carry the UFC or doesn't even really promote it. I mean, we've seen a little bit here and there coming up. But with this Fox Sports, I think the average fan that either watches ESPN or is a sports enthusiast, I mean, I think we're kind of excited to see this. And, I mean, it's going to touch a little bit of everything, and I think that's what they're headed. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely polls toward what Fox has. I think it's looking toward the future, and what Fox is doing is they are appealing to the young male demographic, most definitely. Sports is what they believe what is DVR free. It's the last vestiges of what they could sell to advertisers. I think in a world where you could fast forward through everything, live sports is something that you cannot, and it's also something that most people want to see and not want to record. So definitely, it's going where it's supposed to be going.
Well, yeah, and especially with social media, because you can't really, if you're on social media and you're trying to avoid like sports scores or what happened, you're in trouble. So you're right from that perspective. But so my question is, who ultimately is going to be in charge of the talent for Fox Sports moving forward? I'm really basically looking out for me, you, and TJ, Chase. I want to make sure that if there's openings over at Fox, we know if we need to contact the UFC or if we need to contact Fox. No, just kidding. But, when you see, Ara Hawani and Karen Bryant and these guys get hired, are they going to be – because they're going to have to fill content. So I would imagine Fox Sports 1 and maybe to a larger extent Fox Sports 2 is going to start looking for personalities to start filling it. Is it going to be the John Annex of the world, or is it going to be a whole new crop of guys?
I think you definitely see you'll see people move within Fox Sports One. Definitely there's regional networks that they can pull people from as well. There's definitely the John Annex of the world that can move over. Maybe we'll see people from the old MMA Live crew on ESPN move over to Fox Sports. You'll never know who will show up there, but definitely with more programming going on Fox Sports, there'll be a definite need for people to move over into those particular roles. That, or they'll just have Ariel do everything.
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump on into the next one. The economics of MMA in New York. Is it as simple as just replacing Newark market, or does New York become a fight destination like Vegas that hosts multiple fights a year?
Well, I think that I'm not sure if they want to eliminate the Newark market, but I think what they want to do is open up that New York market. So what that means is they are, pegging MSG Madison Square Garden for November as their first event in the state. They could also, thinking of that, there's a lot of media that they could touch and go in there and do a lot of marketing and appeal to a lot of the sponsors within that state. Aside from Madison Square Garden, there's also the newly up down there in Brooklyn, the Barclays Center. Those two venues are two venues that I could see the UFC doing. Every 6 months doing an event there. You could definitely envision some sort of Madison Square Garden big event during the fall. You got the Las Vegas 4th of July weekend, and then you throw in a Barclays Center event there. So maybe perhaps 2 to 3 big events in the New York State area. The Newark area is still someplace they can go. Maybe you could have a lesser event, but definitely when you open up New York, you could appear on all the shows there. You can appear on Fallon. You can appear on all the morning shows, Good Morning America, what have you. You could ring the bell and at the stock exchange, that kind of thing, and definitely that would open up a lot of dollars for the UFC.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it's going to be a hot commodity at first. Fans are going to jump all over, and I think personally, I would think the UFC is going to jump all over this, because they've had such a struggle getting in there, and now they're going to get in there. Are they going to ride this tidal wave and try to eat it up as much as they can at first?
I would think so. I think definitely with the first 2 to 3 events, they'll get massive exposure for being in there. Definitely, if everything goes to according to plan and they do a November card. It'll be probably one of the biggest cards that they'll have. It'll be a definite sellout. There'll be massive, media to cover the event. It'll be on every show. They'll get every hit in the New York State area. I mean, well, not New York, New York City area, and definitely it'll be something that the UFC will covet.
Okay, and I guess my question is, and I've talked about this before, TJ. To me, there's kind of a battle going on for the hearts and minds of New York in terms of with the Nets and with the Knicks and the Madison Square Garden and the Barclays Center. So for me, it makes a lot of sense for the Barclays Center to kind of grab a hold of MMA because they're Brooklyn and Brooklyn's hip again. The hipsters live in Brooklyn now. It's not the thugs, and the Nets are kind of hip. Jay-Z owns them. It makes sense for me that the Barclays Center would grab onto MMA and have it its own because Madison Square Garden has such a history of boxing. My question to you is, why is neither the Barclays Center or Madison Square Garden part of the lobbying interest that's trying to get MMA in there when they seem to be able to profit from it so much?
That's a very good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. I would think that both organizations are waiting and seeing to see what becomes of either the lawsuit or of what the legislature says. I think what the concern is for both of these, both MSG and Barclays Center, is that they don't know, they don't want to invest in anything that they don't know will actually come out. So I'm actually wondering, why Madison Square Garden isn't doing a little more as far as lobbying or actually helping out the UFC since the UFC secured the date. But who knows who is behind what Madison Square Garden, the people behind Madison Square Garden, what they're doing and thinking, and maybe they are supporting the UFC, but maybe not in a active way.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too, because you would think that one or the other or both, being in New York and being an establishment, they don't want to burn the bridges for whoever's trying to keep MMA out of New York, right? So, I mean, if it's private investors or if it's this or that, how the political back rooms deals go down. So I would think that they're kind of staying out of it until they see if it passes or not. And once they do, I bet you they're both going to jump all over it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think so, TJ.
All right, moving on to the next bit of business. It's kind of a news story, but the financial underpinnings of it is what I'm fascinated to talk to you about, Jason. So it came out. Mark Hunt turned down a fight with Junior Dos Santos, and Hunt says, it's a big battle on Twitter between him and Dana White. He says he never turns down fights. Dana White says he turns down this one. And then there was something on Twitter that said that they had a great conversation. It was kind of, cryptic. And then I'll give credit where credit is due, because I talked to MMA Adam Martin about it, and I asked him what's the deal, and he said, look at Front Row Brian's Twitter feed, which I did, and he says it's all about the financial part of it. So my question to you is, as it came out later on, Mark Hunt he wanted to fight, he didn't like the terms. So Dana White very often says, for example, Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche, he says no one wanted to fight her except Liz Carmouche. So my question is, if Mark Hunt wanted to fight Junior Dos Santos, but not for X amount of dollars, technically he turned down the fight, okay? But that's not how Dana portrays people turning down the fight. So do you think in the past there have been times when people have turned down fights and it was because they didn't like the financial terms when they were willing to actually, have the fight?
Yeah, probably. I definitely think there could be scenarios where people are offered fights and they just either for one thing or another they get lowballed or they don't like the terms of their deal, or they don't get pay-per-view points or anything like that. I definitely think the UFC is, very good at their negotiating with fighters. And even if there's some pushback, there might be just the UFC says take it or leave it, and if the fighter says no, I don't want to do the fight for X amount of money, then they'll move on to the next guy. And that perhaps is what happened with Ronda Rousey, Liz Carmouche, is that I believe Miesha Tate originally said she never turned down a fight or never was offered a fight, and perhaps maybe she was actually offered one, but she didn't want the terms of the deal. That's pure speculation, but to answer your point, yeah, there's probably scenarios like you had suggested.
Yeah, and it comes down to the popularity, right? So when you're getting to fight, if you're stepping in to fight somebody that's making more money and it's going to be either headlining a pay-per-view or the co-main event, I mean, you want some of the piece of the action too, and who wouldn't? I mean, you just come off a fight, and then they're offering you another one, and against somebody like Junior Dos Santos, I mean, you definitely got to take into account that, okay, this is going to be a watched fight. People are going to view it. I mean, you're not going to have to sell it a lot. I just want part of my money. So I think fighters who have to step it up, and against opponents that have that talent set, it's going to benefit them if they want a little bit more money. Who wouldn't want it?
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure what Hunt was paid for his fight in Japan. I don't know if those figures were released yet, and I'm not sure what level he is at right now. If he's a 20,000 to show, 20 to win guy, or where he is at in terms of that type of ladder. So I'm not sure if he wanted a big step up to fight Dos Santos, or what. Maybe perhaps he wanted to see some sort of good faith that he was going to go in on a short term, just he's going to be a fill-in fighter, fill in for Overeem, and maybe he wanted to see more money than he was actually off.
Yeah, I guess my question, Jason, is: do you think that it's fair then to say that someone turned down a fight if they're not? I mean, is it a little misleading on Dana's part to say they turned down a fight if they just didn't like the terms?
Semantic. It is. I mean, I definitely think that. Wow. I think it's accurate for Dana White to tell the press that the so and so turned down a fight, but it's a little misleading if the reason they turned down the fight is because they offered less money than they should have. So I'm not sure if it's wrong for Dana White to say that. I mean, it's definitely would be accurate. It's so I mean it's just I guess a play on words that hey, you could take the fight if I pay you $1,000. Well, I don't want $1,000. Well, okay, you turn down the fight. It's that kind of thing. So perhaps it's not accurate, but I don't know if it's fully the whole truth is behind what's going on behind closed doors, I guess.
Well, and real quick, in fairness to Mark Hunt, our crack research department has brought us this piece of information. Mark Hunt was paid $62,000 for that fight. However,
okay.
$50,000 of it was a knockout of the night bonus. He was paid 6 to show and 6 to win. So if you're Mark Hunt, I mean, you got what? I got to get a knockout of the night around here to get paid. So, in fairness to him, I mean, what's he asking for? 12? I mean, you just gave him 6. So you know what I'm saying? So I see where he's coming from. To a point. I mean, obviously, if you go in there and knock out Junior Dos Santos, then your whole world changes.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think a couple things here. Definitely. I mean, why not pay the guy double what he made? Like 6. So he was a 6-6 guy. You can't boost him to 12-12. He's going to be on a semi-main event Memorial Day weekend, if memory serves me right. And one other thing about Mark Hunt is that perhaps he's not the most attractive of fighters or fighting style. It's more it's more of a lumbering style. He does definitely like Roy Nelson pack a punch, but perhaps the concern from the UFC is that you'll see a guy with hands down in the third round, lumbering around, in one of those fights that people boo. So maybe that's the UFC's concern. But to get back to your point, the fact that Mark Hunt only doesn't make a whole lot of money, and now he's going to be bumped up to a semi-main event. It's not out of it's not out of range for him to ask for double, even triple the money.
Yeah, it's true. I agree. Okay, so let's move on. Next up, we're gonna talk about a new feature that we have going on. It's going to be MMA stock up, stock down. So what I'm going to do is you've already filed your stock up, stock down. I'm going to run them down, and you just tell me why it is you think this person's stock is up and stock is down. It can be a promotion, it can be a fighter, it can be whatever.
Okay.
All right. So starting with 5, going to 1, the first thing that you're calling in your stock up of the week is the World Series of Fighting. Why do you feel like that stock's up on that?
Definitely they benefited from the UFC cuts. Excuse me. John Fitch, Gerald Harris in June, that's going to be a good fight. The signing of Jacob Volkman also is going to be a good fight. It definitely, they are an organization that I was concerned with their first showing on NBC Sports Network, but they got another one coming up here in March, and the fact that they've had these signings looks good for the company.
All right, next up is Mark Hunt. It's interesting, the conversation that we just had. So you have his number 4 in your stock ups, Mark Hunt. Why is that?
I think Mark Hunt, if this actually turns out that Dana is going to give him back the fight, I think he'll definitely shoot up the heavyweight rankings. He definitely showed his power against Stefan Struve, and he can if he does take the fight, he is definitely on his way up the heavyweight ranking.
All right, next up, number 3 is Vanderlei Silva. Go ahead with him.
Silva showed the old Silva against Brian Stann. I thought that a lot of questions about him. Maybe he should retire, but he might be a niche kind of guy. He can be a guy who just fights in Brazil and Japan, and people will clamor for him. When they love that guy in Japan.
And not to I'm going to do a little foreshadowing here, or kind of give a heads up. My fight strong is going to have something to do with Vanderlei Silva, or I'm sorry, finish strong is going to have something to do with Vanderlei Silva. So stick around for that. Okay, so Fox Sports 1 is your number 2 stock up.
Oh, definitely Fox Sport 1. We already talked about that. It's definitely coming in August 17th, and it will definitely be good for the UFC to be on that channel.
All right, number 1 stock up for this week is Nick Diaz press conferences, which tell me about that, and then tell me what you think about Nick Diaz in terms of his marketability as well.
Nick Diaz's press conference was one of those things where I was not listening to it, and then when you look at the Twitter feed and you see the people say, "Oh my God, Nick Diaz," I had to immediately jump on and listen to it. He is a guy that the UFC keeps around. If he was not Nick Diaz, he probably would have been already fired by the company. And the press conference showed why he got the fight against GSP.
Yeah, I think that was with your number 1. I have to totally agree with you. That stock has to be up. I mean, we're talking about a fighter, and he talked about it in his press conference, just his background where he's coming up. And I don't ultimately think he's trying to be a bad guy. He just wants to fight, and to get people to recognize him. I think he's done this all his life, from his background up, and he speaks the truth, right? And I think that's why I like this so much. I mean, he just says whatever's on his mind, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, well, so be it. So I thought it was an interesting conference call. I enjoyed it very much, and man, I can't even wait for this fight. Like, I wish it was tonight. I might even sell my firstborn just to go watch that fight.
Quick little thing here. When I was here, I'm out here in Seattle, and when I went to the UFC on Fox event here in December, and I have to say the second biggest ovation at the weigh-ins, or whenever they showed them, were the Diaz brothers, Nick and Nate. First went to BJ Penn. And so, I mean, and that's with Benson Henderson, local guy, on top of the card. So the Diaz brothers definitely are definitely marketable despite all the middle fingers and the F bombs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to recall back when it was on CBS and the whole Mayhem Miller
Yes.
showdown that went. I mean, who could forget about that? I mean, that was pretty much a disastrous thing that almost like crumbled CBS as it was.
Yeah.
All right, Jason. So let's go ahead and get to your stock downs. We'll start with number 5 again, work our way up. Your number 5 stock downs, Brian Stan. Let me know why.
Brian Stan, disappointing performance a couple weeks ago. Here's a guy who is well-spoken, has a great background, who they've groomed to be, a contender in that division, and he just got knocked out, and he's going to have to start over again as far as trying to make his way up the division ranking.
Yeah, that was I like to touch on that because I'm a huge Brian Stan fan. I mean, huge fan of his, and I was disappointed too because it seemed like if he would have just been smart when he came into that ring, and I know with all the stuff in Japan and Vanderlei Silva, but you got to stick to your game plan. I was really disappointed that he really got in a brawl with him and kind of abandoned. He just kind of came up firing guns and got knocked out, and I was a little disappointed. But hopefully he can make a come up again.
Yeah, most definitely. I just thought that he just went away from his game plan, and he worked towards what Silva does best.
Yep.
All right, number 4 is Alistair Overeem, and again, to kind of give a little preview of something that's coming up, I'm writing a piece right now for Cage Wall about Alistair Overeem, which I'm entitling "The Demolish Man" because he's no longer the Demolition Man, and things are starting to change for him. And much in the same way of the Lance Armstrongs and all these guys who have PEDs in their past have sort of different falls from grace. I think Overeem may be going through his right now. And I honestly, another part of the piece I'm going to write about is that I don't understand the UFC sticking with him through all this. But, that's neither here nor there. Why is he your number 4?
Oh, same reasons. I think disappointing fight against Silva, one of the dumbest fight plans ever, just to stand in front of a guy and disrespect him like that. I mean, he had to have known that he could have gotten knocked out. And, obviously having to pull out of another fight because of an injury always brings up the question of, was it just the PEDs that were helping him?
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about him, man. It's the worst kept secret probably in the history of MMA. I mean, you look at the guy, he went from looking like a tiger, being built like a tiger, to being built like a rhinoceros, and the guy looks at you like nothing happened. He's just like, well, I had some horse meat, we called it a day. It's like, all right, that's tough to believe, but okay. So, all right, your number 3, even though it's the inaugural edition of Stock Up, Stock Down, Mark Hunt making history. He's on both lists, so why'd you put him on the Stock Down list as well?
I think I put him on the stock down list in the event that he did actually turn down a fight with Junior Dos Santos. Playing devil's advocate, regardless of how much he's getting paid, if he's going to be on top of the card or near the top of the card against JDS, it's the chance to. I mean, Mark Hunt's not a young guy. He needs to take advantage of these fights when he can. You knock out JDS and you are top 2 to 3 in line. You could definitely stake your claim to be in line with to get a fight with Cain Velasquez. So from that perspective, you kind of have to say, hey, if they're offering you JDS, take them.
I'm going to throw this out to TJ real quick, and then we'll come back to you, Jason. If you're Mark Hunt, do you take this fight for free? I mean, if whatever they offer you.
No, I mean, ultimately, you definitely have to take something for it. I mean, it just depends on how much passion you have. I mean, do you really want to make that climb? Where are you at in your career? That's the question. I mean, how hungry is he to climb the ladder and maybe ultimately go for a title shot? That's what it comes down to. If he's that hungry, then yeah, you take the fight no matter what and step in there and try to get my name recognized more out in the public so you can make more the next one. So I think it just comes down to him and how much he wants to move up the chain.
Jason, it poses an interesting question. I mean, you have to strike while the iron's hot, but what iron is hot here for Mark Hunt? The iron that says you need to fight the best guy you can in the moment for whatever, or now you have some negotiating traction here and you should go that route?
I definitely think that if I was Mark Hunt's advisor, I would say, you have to think about your career and who they offer you. He's not going to get. You don't want to take an interim fight. You don't want to take a Roy Nelson and get knocked out, and then we'll see you on a Fuel or Facebook fight down the road. If they're offering you Junior Dos Santos, you're going to have. You could, playing devil's advocate, bite the bullet, take whatever they give you, make the money back up in sponsorships and other things like that, and then if you knock out Junior Dos Santos, then you're in the catbird seat, and you'll be able to talk to Dana, sit at the table with Dana, and perhaps negotiate something more lucrative.
Yeah, he's in a very precarious position. I'm interested to see how this all plays out. I mean, they had a great conversation. I don't know if that means he's going to take the fight or he's not. To me, he's actually in the same position as Brandon Vera. I mean, he won. Brandon Vera had this monster fight with Shogun, starts to get respect from everybody again, and Vera to me just kind of was like, I got a fight of the night bonus. That's kind of like, I think it's interesting with some guys. I feel like they do this, and I could be wrong. If you get a fight of the night bonus, it's almost like you fought again. So why not just wait it out, let yourself heal, kind of figure out what your next move is. And Brandon Vera is milking this war that he was in with Shogun, ultimately a loss for all it's worth, and he's kind of plotting out his next move. So, all right, moving on. Your number 2 guy here on Stock Down is Josh Koscheck. Tell me why.
He just had a disappointing showing. His career is nearing an end. I used to be a big fan of Josh Koscheck, and he just is not. He didn't show a lot in his last fight, and I don't know how many more fights the UFC will give him.
TJ, what do you think about Josh?
Man, I would have to agree with Jason because, even when the start of the fight, it just doesn't seem like he was self when he was coming into the ring. It's like, I don't know if he's taking a step back, if he's mentally disengaged with what he's doing right now. I don't know. I think he has to do some soul searching because, if he wants to stay in the UFC, he definitely has to put on a better performance than he did last time. And I think it comes down to what we saw in the ring when he got knocked out. I mean, he just didn't seem like he was all there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Koscheck is either on his way out. I mean, he's pretty much on Fitch train. He's on the Fitch train to World Series of Fightingville. So I don't know if it's going to be the next stop, but it's coming. So, all right, number 1, and based on you picking this person as your number 1 stock down, I know for certain that they're not going to reboot the Scooby-Doo series with this gentleman playing Shaggy, because Matthew Riddle is your number 1 stock down, so clearly that's not going to happen. Why is he your number 1 stock down?
Well, he was caught again for marijuana use, and it's one of those things where you just have to know what's going on. He definitely won 3 or 4 fights in a row, but the UFC still will test you, and he had to have known that. And to continue to use marijuana when he had already had been caught is just purely just stupid. And now the UFC is a good job, and he was he'll find another organization to fight with, but just to turn your nose up against the UFC like that, I'm not sure if I don't want to say he won't come back to the UFC, but it may be a while before you see him again.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And not only did he's the one that was smoking, got caught with it, and then when they interviewed him, he was like, "Well, I'm sure UFC is going to give me a call after I win 5 or 6 fights, and I'm going to tell them no because I don't like where they're going." How are you going to comment like that when you're the one that got busted, not just once, but twice, with the marijuana? I mean, you have to know they're going to test you. And if you continue to go down that road, I mean, it's obviously what you want to choose. It's obviously what you want to do in your spare time and leading up to the fight is smoke marijuana. I mean, you got to make a choice. If you're a fighter, a professional fighter, or a professional athlete in any means, I mean, you can't be displaying this kind of behavior. I think it was just childish, and he got what he deserved.
Yeah, and yeah, his comments definitely will hurt him in the future. The UFC is the biggest organization and the organization that will pay him the most, and he has to realize, he has a career, he has to make a living, and unless his heart isn't into being a fighter, then I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think the line of the week, again, MMA Roasted had a great line on Twitter. They said, after Matt Riddle said that if the UFC calls, he's not answering, they said that's because his phone's going to be disconnected. So I think that was a great line by them, and so props to them for that. So yeah, I don't know. Matt Riddle, man, he's a curious guy to me. There's a couple guys that just, these we can sit here and probably list the quote-unquote MMA potheads, and some of them care and some of them don't. Matt Riddle's just like, hey, man, whatever. And he even tried to compare that, smoking weed is not as bad as doing PEDs, and which it may not be, but these are the rules. You broke them. You can't exactly come down on the UFC for a rule you broke. All right, Jason. The last thing I want to touch on with you is the conference call. I want to touch back on this because I want to get a perspective from you on: do you think that these kind of things, these conference calls, they in any way affect the gate, the pay-per-views? I mean, this conference call has gotten a lot more traction than a lot of other conference calls. And I'm going to delve into this a little bit further after you answer this question, because I kind of want to talk about Nick Diaz a little bit more. But do you think that these numbers are already kind of predestined? This is going to be a sellout. This is going to do X number of dollars, or has this conference call helped this fight financially?
Oh, the conference call has definitely helped the fight financially. It's going to, I'm sure the UFC is going to cut up the conference call and use it as one of their promos for this in the upcoming weeks. In the next week, couple days, I guess. I think what it showed was you have Nick Diaz as this guy who has this animosity at no one and everyone at the same time. And you have GSP, you got to feel for GSP at the conference call, because he's not sure how this is. It's like they handed out a script and he didn't get one, and he's wondering, how am I supposed to? I guess the greatest line from GSP was at one point when Diaz was going on a tirade, he had said something to the effect of, "I don't even understand your English." It was classic entertainment, and if you were just a casual viewer and were a casual MMA fan and were to listen to this conference, you definitely would want to check in and say, "Hey, this guy is nuts, and I'd like to see these two fight."
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what this has done is created pretty much a civil war. I mean, and what I mean by this is, if you go to any blog, any website, and people that are leaving comments, I mean, people are battling against each other. I mean, next door neighbors, friends. I mean, you're either picking GSP or you're Diaz, and these people are leaving comments and cussing each other out and trying to compare these two. I mean, you have really brought fans really more integrated into this fight just by him doing this. It's crazy to read some of them, like Twitter, blogs, websites. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, people are really buzzing about that. And what does that do? That ultimately brings money into the UFC, because more people are going to buy the pay-per-views, more people are going to buy the tickets and go watch this, and even restaurants, bars, they're all going to benefit because people want to see this. I mean, it's an ultimate thing. When I'm sure Dana was sitting back and just laughing and thinking, man, this one's going to be a good one.
I thought it was funny that Dana left, and maybe he was just going to sit back and enjoy the fireworks as it was going on, because it would have been interesting to see what he would have done if he had stayed. Would he have tried to break up some of that stuff, or would he have just let Nick Diaz go?
Yeah, it's great. But ultimately, he's got to be seeing dollar signs rolling all over this pay-per-view.
Oh, definitely think that it's, especially with it being in Montreal, also is going to garner a lot of a lot of support for the.
Yeah, that thing's gonna be rocking. I don't even that decimal point on that when that crowd starts when GSP starts coming down or even Diaz. I mean that crowd is just gonna put something special in the air.
Okay, so moving on, I agree completely with what you guys are saying, but moving on, what do you think about Nick Diaz, Jason, in terms of a marketable fighter? Because when you talk to him a little bit, I mean, he kind of comes off, a little whiny. He kind of comes off of a why not me? In the conference call, he said, I don't get Nike and I don't get Adidas. I don't have anybody powder my nose. When I get done with a workout, nobody hands me a T-shirt. Nobody. Now, granted, he can use that kind of to fuel his fire a little bit, but at some point, Nick Diaz is kind of this paradox in terms of marketability where, yes, people love the truth. I mean, people love guys that are real and speak the truth. And right now, Nick Diaz is almost like a Chael Sonnen type, except he's spitting nothing but legit noise, whereas Chael kind of takes you for a ride. So the first part of my question is, do you think there's a market for Nick Diaz for bigger sponsors? I mean, because he's a loose cannon, you can't trust the guy. And second, do you think the UFC's rooting for, and TJ kind of, again, to foreshadow a little bit, TJ's kind of going to examine some of this leading up to the fight and some articles he's writing. Do you think that the UFC would be in favor of a Nick Diaz as a champion or not in favor?
Well, I think you make, well, first of all, I know for a fact that there is not, there's, as far as the marketing of Nick Diaz, he's not a want. I mean, there are companies that want to work with him. There's, from what I understand, there's a lot of companies that like the polarizing Nick Diaz. The fact that either you like him or hate him. The fact that you like him or hate him, at least you're talking about him. So that does make him a marketable person. He was talking about how he's an anti-hero, that kind of thing. That appeals to a lot of people. In the same way as Steve Austin appealed to the WWE fans. I definitely think that sort of I think that sort of what was drawn out in that teleconference was basically a class warfare. Like you have here GSP, a guy who has you got people handing him towels and giving him water afterward, and you got a guy who is getting cursed out on the streets of Lodi, California because he's just a fighter and he's just it's really bad where he lives at. I think that people can familiarize themselves with a Nick Diaz, that he's been down and out, and they understand that. And some people can familiarize themselves with GSP, but I think you definitely have that sort of working man's champion. And as far as will he be marketable as a UFC champion, I definitely think so. I think in the same way that Stone Cold Steve Austin was, marketable, Nick Diaz could still be that way. And the thing is, and talking to people that know him, he's not a bad guy. When he was here in Seattle, he was taking pictures with fans, smiling, talking to them, chatting them up. I'm not sure what it is about the obligations he has to do, whether he just does not like that, like someone telling him what to do, that he feels like he has a cross to bear or whatnot. But he definitely is someone that people would be attracted to as a champion.
I agree. And before TJ jumps in here, I know he's got something to say. That is about as astute a observation as anyone could make, Jason. I'm not a huge fan of the crossover between wrestling and MMA. I just don't. I don't like the whole one's fake and one's real, and I don't like to get clouded. All that stuff, the kind of stuff that went on in Pride. I don't like that getting clouded because I love the fact that MMA is real, and I don't like that crossover. But you are on the money when you compare like the whole Stone Cold Steve Austin, Generation X, where everything went through that phase where you're flipping off your boss. Some guy has a boss he hates, and he comes home, and there's Nick Diaz flicking everybody off and saying, FTW and all that stuff. I mean, that's perfect. That is exactly how he can be marketed. But it has to stay real. So the minute Nick Diaz starts playing ball, he starts losing a little credibility in that sense. So it's weird. It's almost like he has to stay a loose cannon for you to be able to market him as a loose cannon, but he doesn't show up for shit when you need to market him. So it's weird, man. He's this crazy paradox that can really, Anyway, TJ, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I mean, listen, I love Diaz, and I love what he did on the conference call, and I love the way he speaks his mind, and he's kind of all over the place. Because he's just like anyone else. I mean, just like you said, it's almost like a class deal. I mean, people relate to that kind of stuff, and I don't know if it's just me or what draws me to him is I don't think he's a bad guy. I mean, what he's doing is trying to market himself and get the big fights. He wants to make money too. He wants to come out the depths of hell from where he was to be a champion, and he strives. I mean, look what he does on the side. I mean, the triathlons, like he was said, signing autographs. I've seen pictures on Twitter, even on Facebook, that he's talking to fans and he's signing autographs. I mean, this guy can attract people that you're just your average Joe, coming out of the household type of person, and that's what I really like about him. Is I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than what he brings to the table, and in that regards. I mean, when he's like that, and he's kind of standoffish to some of the brass, so to speak, in the UFC or whatever it is, or even the media, that he starts to get a bad rap. So, is the UFC going to accept him as a champion? I personally think, this is my opinion, of course. I don't think they want to see him as a champion. But if he does become the champion, they're definitely going to market him and run with him because he can play that type of to reach out into the homes and that bad boy image, like Jason said, with that Stone Cold Steve Austin bit. So I think it's great, and I'm actually I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm actually pulling for him for the fight.
Well, it's interesting because I used to say a long time ago, and some guys don't do this as well as others. Obviously, Jay-Z did this famously, spectacularly well. You can use the same analogy with Nick Diaz that you would use with rappers. If you're a rapper and you've rapped your whole life about selling drugs and being poor and trying to make a come up, what happens when you make that? And now you're rich. Can you still rap in the same way about that? So what happens when Nick Diaz does have a guy handing him a new shirt and a water bottle? What happens when Nick Diaz does have someone powdering his nose and doing his finances, and he has the quote-unquote passive income that GSP says that he has? Is he still going to have that edge that is the appeal to all the fans, or does it? Listen, the guy had the greatest line, perhaps, in the history of MMA when he called himself the superhero of anti-bullshit. I mean, that might be the greatest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, that's right there with Chael Sonnen. I mean, everything Chael Sonnen said, that puts him right in that running. So, I mean, Nick is real. And Nick will look at you and, I mean, whatever it is that Nick perceives, although the entire rest of the world does not see things that way, that's how Nick sees it. And that's Nick's reality, and that's what he goes off of. You know, if somebody doesn't hold a door for Nick, it's because they don't respect him, and he's ready to fight him. And it's like, dude, I just didn't see you. Take it easy. Like, it's like that's Nick's world is Nick's world. So there's one more thing I kind of want to throw at you, Jason, before we get you out of here, because I saw it on Twitter, and it's really a great story, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit later. So Alden Halpern, who is the CEO of MMA Elite, is paying for Mark Coleman to get his hip replacement surgery, which is $100,000. It's a very great gesture on Alden's part. He's huge in social media, huge in giving back to the fans. My question to you is, I don't want to call it a marketing ploy. What I want to ask you is, does it have a benefit beyond just a selfless act for a legend in the history of MMA?
Yes. And simply because it was announced via Twitter, and, it was announced and people know about it. You hear about these things, Dana White doing things for people, and some of the stuff is marketed, and some of the stuff is not marketed. Obviously, this could have been handled, and no one could have known who paid for the surgery. But in the end, it's definitely a good thing that they did it for Coleman, and in the end, he gets his health. He gets his health out. It's paid for, and they definitely MMA Elite still benefits the goodwill of doing this.
Folks, well, there you have it. He is huge with Soccer Moms in Lodi. He is the mighty and prolific writer from MMAPayout.com. Follow him on Twitter at MMAPayout and Dilettante. The one, the only, Jason Cruz, dropping the knowledge as always. Jason, I appreciate it, and we can't wait to have you on again.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure as always, guys, and have a good night.
You too.
Take it easy.
Well, TJ, the higher we raise the bar for Jason, the higher he jumps. Another great week. He gave us stock up, stock down, a lot to talk about. What you and I are going to go into next is something that I think needs a little bit more time.
Listen, I got to jump back. I think I could talk to Jason all night. I mean, we could probably run a podcast for like 5 or 6 hours just going back and forth between us three. That's how great this kid is and his knowledge, and he brings up some good questions. I mean, he makes you think about a lot of stuff when it comes to the financial industry and how people are marketed. It's great, man. I can't wait to have him on again.
Every time we have him on, he delivers, and it's I think that we're talking about integrating some music into the show. I think that from now on we have Jason on. I'm going to play "Cash Rules Everything Around Me" by Wu-Tang. That's going to be his intro.
Yes.
I think that's perfect. So again, you can't help but love the kid, and that's true in terms of Cash Rules Everything Around. I mean, money makes the world go round. As much as we hate to kind of admit it, and Jason kind of can show us where which way the compasses are pointed based on the way people are making maneuvers financially. Now, on to the business of talking to you about the GSP Nick Diaz conference call. I want to get your thoughts on this abstractly. I have a list of quotes that I will read to you. Post your comments, but Jason touched on it, and it is important, but we did not give it the time it deserves. So please, your thoughts on the conference call of all conference calls between GSP and Nick Diaz this week.
Listen, man, when I got on it and I was listening to it and it just went on rant, I think because I have a full-time job, I actually had to close my door in my office because I was laughing so hard. I thought it was the greatest thing, and then I tweeted about it afterwards. I was like, that was the best conference call I've ever heard, and this fight versus GSP and Diaz is going to be fucking bananas. That's exactly what I tweeted, because it is. It's going to be fucking bananas, because that is exactly what that conference was. It was fucking bananas. I mean, I can't even explain the rant and raven. I mean, Diaz is talking, there are people asking him questions, and he starts one direction and then he throws to another direction. Just when you think he's done, like they'll ask GSP a question, and he fucking answers for him. Like I said earlier, I mean, it's the great. He just kept on and talking about powdering noses, and then when GSP says he doesn't get on Twitter, he has people doing it. That fucking just even made Diaz fucking roll with punches. I mean, it was almost like everything that GSP said was he was playing right into Diaz's hand for him to make a comment on. It was just punch after punch after punch, and I mean, it was great. I loved it. I loved it. And on a serious note, I mean, we just witnessed a little bit what inside is Diaz's mind. I mean, that's some crazy shit. I mean, he's just he speaks his mind, but it kind of makes you think of what he's thinking. His reality, like you said earlier, it lets you kind of take of an inside look into what he's thinking. Man, it's just crazy.
Well, yeah, and there is a side of Nick Diaz that feels like he's underappreciated. There's a side of Nick Diaz that feels like he's underrated and undervalued and all that. So, again, he's a very interesting guy, man. I would be interested to see. I'm a Gemini, and I think that at times I'm of two minds. And I think that about Nick Diaz. On the one hand, he'll tell you he gets paid too much for what he does. And on the other hand, he tells you that he should be getting the love like these other guys, which we'll see. I mean, you beat GSP, you're going to get the love. It's just a matter of, it's just crazy. So let's hit some of these quotes. They're lengthy, so I'm going to try and get through them as quick as I can. Okay. This is Nick Diaz. My life's a mess. I'm not afraid to admit it. I work hard regardless through this shit. But I don't have people toweling me off and handing me water bottles left and right. and getting my training paid for me. I've got to do all this shit on my own, and every day I know it. That's why I know I have to go that much harder and concentrate, do that much more, because I don't have people taking care of my money or financial tax obligations or what have you. I'm too busy fighting all your fights. I'm too busy entertaining all the fans. I don't see anybody else bringing shit to the table. I mean, that's that's prolific. All right,
Yeah.
next. So the best part of there was another Nick quote, so we'll put that on the back burner. But here's the St. Pierre quote. Are you listening to yourself, Nick? Listen to yourself a little bit. I mean, it was so funny, man. It was like Martin and Lewis. Like Nick was just Jerry Lewis going bananas, and Diaz was, St. Pierre was just playing a straight man, and it was crazy, you know. Okay, here's more Diaz. I don't know what he's going through, the whole dark side or where he comes from or whatever. I know where the fuck I come from. I don't have to drudge up some bullshit to get everybody excited. You know, I don't get a lot of recognition for what I've set out to do here. Nobody knows who I am. I mean, I guess everybody does. But as far as like your mainstream magazines and your Nike, Adidas, and all your good stuff, you know, I'm left out of that. And that's too bad. You know, hello, are you there? It was just insanity, man. The whole thing was insanity. I don't care if there's a camera crew in the back seat of my car. I could give a shit. I just don't like when I'm not ready for it and don't know about it. You got George, and someone is over there powdering his nose out and send him off for a video shoot. He's got someone making a Twitter for him. Now he don't even know how to talk and act right. He's got people living his life for him in public. I mean, it was just crazy, man. It was just like, and then here's St. Pierre. Let me tell you something, uneducated fool. Listen to me. I've not always been rich. I start from the bottom. I made myself. I worked very hard to be where I am right now. I know you don't believe this because you didn't succeed yet, and maybe you will never succeed in your life because I don't think you're smart enough to understand how you should do to reach that point. I mean, these guys were like, and you know, it's like Jason hit it right on the head, man. It's class warfare. It's Nick Diaz is, you know, the guy that can't figure it out, and he's not pampered, and it's St. Pierre up on his, you know, I guess high horse, kind of saying you'll never get on this horse because you can't figure it out, man. You can't put it together. I mean,
it's
go ahead.
crazy, and you're right. It's like Diaz has to struggle against his own self. I mean, just look at what he's saying. It's like he's just trying to make it day by day. It's not, he can't see past tomorrow, and that's what I think he's trying to say is I can't see myself with all this money. Nobody knows who I am. Nike, Adidas, and it's too bad. I mean, if they got to see me, they would see this part of me. I mean, listen, some people were dissing him or talking shit about him, how his intelligence might come into play. But if you just stop and really listen to it, man, it's kind of deep because it's something that you don't see all the time about how people are true to themselves and speak the truth and get inside their mind. Like he's letting us in, and this is what we're seeing. It's kind of a deep aspect of behind the scenes with Diaz, and it is what it is. And don't take it all wrong too, because whatever he's done, we can't take away about how great a fighter he is. I mean, a mixed martial artist. I mean, he's got great boxing skills. He's got great jiu-jitsu, and he's a fighter. He has a fucking iron chin. And from his last fights, I mean, he comes in, his cardio is just phenomenal. I don't want anybody to take what he's saying and what he's doing away from what kind of really fighters. I mean, when the average Joe comes to watch this fight, and because they've either heard it or friends are talking about it, and you watch this kid fight against GSP, you're going to see something special, not just with him, but with GSP too. I mean, these are two of the top tier fighters of our time today. I mean, we're talking about today's market. These two are what it's about, and we get to see this, and it's going to be a privilege for all to see.
And at the same time, they're perfectly matched up for one another. Everything Diaz does well, GSP struggles with, and then vice versa. You know, so like GSP is ready to take it, you know, getting takedowns and passing guards and all that. Nick Diaz is great. It has a great guard. Nick Diaz is great on his feet. GSP, while he's dynamic on his feet, certainly doesn't box to the level of anyway, I don't want to get into the particulars because we have a whole next show for that. But I think that what people struggle with when it comes to Nick Diaz is you gotta take what Nick Diaz is gonna give you when he gives it to you. And if you're trying to go look for him, like Nick Diaz is the kind of guy where you could say to him, hey, it's 60 minutes, sit in this chair, I'm gonna ask you a bunch of shit about your childhood, and you're gonna tell me in this next hour. Nick Diaz is in that way. This is what you've been wanting to get from Nick Diaz all this time, this conference call. So you got it. Now listen to it, enjoy it, take what you need to take about Nick Diaz out of it, because he delivers it when he wants to deliver it, not when you want to take it. So if you don't want him to show, if you're upset because he's not showing up to primetime tapings or to countdown tapings or whatever, he just gave you 40 minutes of gold, and this is how he wanted to give it to you, and that's how you have to take it. So you have to then go through that and take from it what you need, but it's all there. He gave it all to you. Everything you want to ever know about Nick Diaz, he told you in this conference call. You just have to go and read between the lines and find it. Now, just for purposes of kind of ending on a lighter note, I'm going to go ahead and say what my two favorite Nick Diaz quotes were here at the end. So this one is, check this out, motherfucker. I pulled up to a stoplight the other day, and some fucking 40-year-old lady, some soccer mom, sticks her head out of the window and says, I hope GSP beats your ass. We're in fucking Lodi, bitch. I'm like, are you serious? I'm living in a fucking small town full of people who hate me over here. That's gold. I mean, that's gold. And that's his reality.
Yep.
You have to hate GSP if you can't drive around in Lodi without a soccer mom telling you she wants him to beat your ass. And then, like he said in the conference call as well, for what? I deserve to get beat down? Nick's funny, man. Nick will talk all this shit about you, and when you start talking about him, he flips the script and says, why do I deserve to get beat down? I'm like, well, you've been talking shit about me for a year. And it's like, I respond, and it's, okay. So the next one is, and this completely, what I love about this one, is it completely just takes all the stuff he said about GSP earlier and completely just wipes the chalkboard off. This guy's amazing. He goes, I hope so, motherfucker. If I had that much money, I'd be fucking pampering myself the fuck up. I'd have motherfuckers pampering my shit left and fucking right. There'd be motherfuckers every hour on the hour showing up to pamper me out, period. Which is what he was giving GSP shit for earlier in the conference call. You gotta love the guy, man. You have to love him. And it's kind of this weird thing, man, with, Nick Diaz makes no bones about the fact that he gets high, and it's funny, it's that pothead logic. 1 minute they're the smartest guy in the world when they're talking, and the next minute they say something that makes you go, oh, that's right, that's why we don't ever put you in charge of shit, because of that one. The other one's got us thinking that you could do something, and that one's just like, oh, that's right, that's why we don't give this guy the keys to the fucking kingdom. So, it's amazing, man. It's amazing that this is kind of how the kid operates.
Yeah, I mean, he gave him straight up gold. I mean, gold on a silver platter. That's what he gave him for 40 minutes. And it was, I mean, you could actually hear fighters in the background that were also on I don't know, I'm guessing it was fighters. It could have been journalists. Hell, I don't know. But you could hear people in the background laughing when he was going on these raves. I mean, it was great. I mean, I think everybody was entertained and everybody was surprised of what they were hearing. I think that's what took GSP back was, holy shit. Like, he's talked a little bit of shit, but this guy is going off. So what do I do what do I say? Like, that's like getting a fucking left cross out of nowhere. Like, where's this kid coming from? So the only thing I have to it's kind of like Martin Lawrence. Like, Martin, you so crazy. And then he was like, dude was just talking shit to him, and all you could come back was, fuck you. That's all I got. That's all I got for you. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And on a side note, we're going to get off the conference call and kind of jump to a similar note, but a little bit different. Cesar Gracie came out and said if UFC is paying a camera guy $50,000 for a couple days, they should pay fighters more. These guys will not give Dana White a damn minute of rest. Like, he wants so badly to make Nick Diaz a star, and there's just so many things that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys and Nick, and not so much Nate, but Cesar and Nick are just like, dude, it's not happening. Whatever you want us to be, we're not going to be. We're going to just completely fight whatever your plans are for us and just shit on it. Like, all they have to do is be quiet and fight, and they're set. But, I mean, obviously, I don't think the UFC pays a camera guy $50,000 for a couple days. But,
who knows?
Do you think Cesar's point's valid?
I mean, basically what he's trying to say, like, what it goes back to the film crew following was trying to follow him around in Stockton, right? He had cameras crew there, and he was losing what $50,000 a day. So that's where he was coming from. If you're paying these motherfuckers $50,000 just to wait around, you need to pay the fighters something, you know.
Yeah. Why are you cutting guys?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of called a shot out. I mean, if you're paying people to follow around for a special, and you can only pay Mark Hunt $6,000 a fight, you know, what's up with that?
I'm so glad you said that because I was about to make a joke of that Mark Hunt should probably go try and be a cameraman for his next fight instead of maybe he should be the cameraman when Dos Santos fights over him instead of fighting Dos Santos because apparently in Cesar Gracie's world, cameramen get seriously paid. All right, up next, Tough 17. It was Clint Hester. It was Jimmy Quinlan. Clint Hester. Yeah, it was. Hester. Yeah, it was Hester, and he was the first pick by Team Jones. He was a very one-dimensional fighter, and it showed. So, Give me your thoughts on the fight. Jimmy Quinlan kind of moving forward, and I mean, Clint Hester didn't really put himself out there well enough to get a wild card, did he?
I mean, listen, during the first round, when he was pinning up against Hester against the fence and trying to take him down, like you were hearing some fucking thud shots. Like Hester has some serious ass power in those hands. I mean, when you're hitting a guy like that, and through the camera on through TV and you're listening to this and you're hearing it like somebody's punching a fucking football. I mean, those are some serious ass hands. Those are some powerful punches. But like you said, he was a little bit one-dimensional. He was looking for the knockout. He came up against a wrestler that was just kept at it, and he was eating those shots. And then he finally, coming to the second round, finally got him, and he took care of business. And that's what Quinlan was trying to do. And that was his game plan the whole time. He even said it up front. Listen, I'm going to come at him hard, and I'm going to get him down. And that's where I want the fight game to go to. And that's what he did. And when he got him down, Hester didn't know really what to do. And got his card pulled.
He did it, and well, first off, it's not looking good for Mr. Jones's picks here. He doesn't seem to be doing too hot. Which, for that matter, I mean, there's been a lot of upsets. Team Sonnen's first three picks are still alive. Zach Cummings fights next week. But yeah, Clint Hester out of there, Bubba McDaniel out of there, Gilbert Smith out of there. So, I mean, is it the Uriah Hall show? I mean, have we decided that already, or does anybody? What do you think about Saman and Uriah? You think Josh Saman could give Uriah a fight, or is it just?
No, I think with that knockout. I mean, not only, I mean, people are really measuring, are still looking to that knockout that he put on, and I mean, let's call it what it is. We really didn't see. I mean, he was holding his own. I mean, he wasn't really dominating the fight up until that kick, I mean, it was a kick heard around the world, but before that, it wasn't really a dominant fight. So, absolutely, I think there could be still could be some competition in this tournament, and it's looking good, man, because some of these guys have really surprised me, especially somebody like Quinlan. I mean, these guys seem like they've had the most talent in a while. All of them can fight, so it's going to be interesting. So I wouldn't put all my stock in Uriah Hall. And it's funny. Let's go back to the series. Like, for a guy who seemed to be anti-bully, I got picked on kind of thing, they're sure showing him in the fucking show to be exactly what he says he doesn't like, right? And he tweeted out, I think it was today or yesterday or something, that he's kind of flabbergasted. So he's upset with FXs because they're editing some shit that are making him look like this. Well, my friend, if they're editing shit, you're still saying it. It's not like you're fucking sitting right there in front of the camera not saying it, because you are. So I think we've seen kind of a different side of him.
Yeah, I agree. And and back on the fighting aspect of it, I mean, we really haven't seen him pushed, and that's the big question with everybody. John Jones, Anderson Silva, whoever you are. So the saying, it's been around forever, holds true. Fatigue makes cowards of us all. So if Uriah Hall doesn't have, and look, he looks like he's putting in a lot of work, but they all do. So, we'll see what happens when he gets pushed. He faces some adversity. I think a guy like Saman could do that. I think that I think that makes for a really interesting fight. I think that I mean, there's some other guys in the house still that could pose some problems for him, obviously, but I think that the way that Saman went out, I mean, if this guy can keep both of his legs attached to his body, he might be able to give him a fight. Who knows? Guy's
Yeah.
in the hospital more than the goddamn cast of Grey's Anatomy, so I don't know what's going to happen, man. He needs to
Yeah, he has
get all that figured out. He's
and
going in there two-piece knocking guys out, and then he's like, Doc, I can't feel my thigh. And it's like, bro, I mean, maybe we should take another thought about this fighting thing. Okay, we're coming in here telling me you can't feel your thigh. It's problematic.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of feel bad for him because I mean he has a history of the blood clots, and that shit's serious, man. Like his last one, they had to cut into that he was in jeopardy of losing his leg. I mean, you gotta love fighting, and you gotta love what you do because when you put your life and your limbs in jeopardy like that, you definitely are doing something that you love. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's before we get to Bellator, because I hope you have a lot more to say about Bellator than I do. I have one very specific thing to say about Bellator, and
And let me guess, and I could probably guess what it's gonna be.
you probably could. But let's get to the Cage Wall fight announcements real quick. Again, presented by our sponsor, Cage Wall. Go to cagewall.com for all the news and updates and great fight posters for the world of mixed martial arts. Okay, so let's run down some of these fights that have been announced recently, TJ, and let me get your thoughts on some of them. So we got Pat Barry versus Sean Jordan, Joseph Benavidez versus Darren Uyenama. Those names, man, they get me every time. Francisco Rivera versus Hugo Viana. Tim Boetsch versus Mark Munoz is an interesting fight. Thiago Silva's fighting Rafael Feijão Cavalcante. Sam Stout versus Isaac Valleyflag, who put himself on the map in his last fight. Sean Pearson versus TJ Wahlberger, and Tim Kennedy versus Roger Gracie. So what of those fights are of interest to you? And I'll also throw in Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman is official now. Little Nog is fighting Shogun.
Or Shogun, yeah. Sorry.
2, and then Rashad's fighting Dan Henderson. So what do you like from all those?
The Boetsch Munoz fight is interesting. Kennedy fight. I mean, there's some really good fights coming up. Just like this roster's stacked, and we as fans get the benefit from that. So those are some interesting fights. The Little Nog fight, even Rashad Evans and Henderson. That's going to be interesting. I think that might be interesting because Evans, we saw him last fight, just get worked, and I don't know who that was in the ring. So listen, if don't count out, because if you step in the ring just like you did against Little Nog, your ass is going to get checked with that fucking H-bomb, believe it. So that's going to be interesting because he's going to have to bring in a tighter game to go against Henderson.
Well, I guess my concern is, and I wrote about this in my Vanderlei Silva piece, it's at cagewall.com. It was about, Vanderlei Silva being the savior of the 205-pound division. And for me, it's like, okay, so I have a horrible fight between Rogerio and Dan Henderson, and the way to reward those two guys is to give them bigger fights. So now Rogerio's fighting Shogun, and Rashad's fighting Henderson. And for me, I'm scared to death of these two fights. I don't know that I'm not going to get two snoozers. Rashad Evans isn't scared to put a snoozer down, and Dan Henderson just put one down. Shogun goes to war, but is Rogerio gonna give him what he needs? Is he going to be a willing dance partner? So these fights, they scare me a lot more than they excite me. I'm really excited about the Boetsch Munoz fight. I usually don't get excited about Tim Boetsch fighting, but Mark Munoz, man, we had that guy on milk cartons a couple weeks ago, and now he's back in there, and I like this fight a lot. What I don't like is Tim Kennedy fighting Roger Gracie because I don't like watching Strikeforce guys fight other Strikeforce guys. I know that's short-sighted of me, and they're still two stud guys, but there's got to be some guy from the UFC you can match him up with. I could have seen this fight in Strikeforce. Still a good fight, and I understand that, and it bothers me. It's like if Anthony Pettis fights Donald Cerrone, just because they were both in WEC doesn't make it a bad fight. But I don't know, man. I'm not crazy about it. All right, so those were the fights. Fight announcements for the week presented again by CageWall.com, our sponsor. Go to CageWall.com for all of your news and fight poster desires to be met. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Bellator 92. I'm going to let you talk about the fight like an adult, and then I'm going to go ahead and tell you my 2 cents about what happened in the fight. So go ahead and talk about Bellator 92 as if a grown-up would. All right, we seem to have lost TJ's audio, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about what? You back?
Can you hear me?
We're good. Go ahead. Talk to me. Bellator 92.
Thanks for the crazy storms out here. It's a little crazy.
We'll touch and go.
Yeah, a little touch and go. So, I mean, like I was saying, the fights were actually really pretty good, entertaining fights. I mean, there wasn't really one that was really boring or anything that slacked. There were, I mean, on the main card, the four fights were really good. And it's surprising because the more I'm watching Bellator now, is the more I'm seeing the talent to get a little bit higher grade, and these guys are putting on fights all the time, and this card that was just there was great. I mean, the one I liked really was the Kramer and the Cooper fight. That was good. The Popo fight, and the Richmond fight, that was good. And Frodo, dude, please do not call that kid a Frodo, because he will fucking take your head off. I mean, he doesn't like to be called that, and now I can see why, because he'll come in and smash you. So they were all some pretty good fights, and I can't say which one was a fight of night for me, because I ultimately liked all the fights.
All right, so now that we got the grown-up talk out of the way, here I go. Speaking of Frodo, let's talk about what happened to his Bilbo Baggins, because he got popped with a knee right in the cup, as Jimmy Smith so eloquently put. The rule is you usually get 5 minutes, but what they said on the telecast is that's kind of a loose rule, and you can take all the time you want. And damn it if Frodo didn't take all the time that he wanted, because I've never in my life seen a fighter react to a shot to the cup like that. I mean, he was in agony. I mean, This guy was on the ground. He was writhing in pain. He was like on his back, stomping his feet. He was spinning over. And McCarthy's like, shake it off, man. Just, move it around. Like, shake it off. Like, McCarthy's like, is this guy shitting me? Like, this has got to be. My question to you is it the worst shot to the cup ever? Or is it he doesn't know how to properly move forward? And the best part, TJ, this is the part that just sold it for me. The guy literally took 9 minutes to recover from a knee to the cup. He wins the fight. What's the first thing he does? Jumps to the top of the cage and straddles it. So I'm sure at that point his balls were back to where they needed to be. But, dude, at least have some consistency here. That's the first thing you do is straddle the top of a cage after I had to wait 9 minutes for you to get your your balls right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shot. I don't know if it was the worst shot I've ever seen. I mean, he did catch him straight up in the nuts.
It was the worst shot he's ever seen.
Yeah, it definitely, or felt. So, and I mean, he was in agony, screaming, and I thought the hell he was having a kid on the ground. He was slapping his hands on the ground. Listen, it's a nut shot, and everybody's been kicked in the nuts before. So, I mean, ultimately, we don't know what it felt like, but god damn, my reaction, it was the worst cup shot I've ever seen. But he came back, but he's a brawler. I mean, the kid. I mean, but let's give it what it was. Sandro is 10 years his older, right? So, I mean, he's a little bit up there in age, and it was. I think he just got outmatched, and I think it took a toll on him through the fight. So ultimately, Frodo was the pusher of the fight. He got him and was working him and just finished. So it was. I mean, he came to brawl, and that's what he did.
He certainly did in his defense. I mean, you get the time. If they're going to give it to you, take it. And, if he comes back early, maybe he loses the fight. He came back when he was ready. And, he's getting his balls busted by me. No pun intended. Actually, you know what? I did intend a pun. How about that? So he's getting his balls busted by me. Certainly not to the extent that he got his balls busted by the other guy. But, he took the time he needed and he won. So, hats off to him. Okay, next up in this extended version of the Flurry on a non-fight week, John Fitch has signed with the World Series of Fighting. He has a dance partner. It is, he's going to face the winner of Aaron Simpson and Josh Berkman, which makes for an interesting matchup, and he'll do it on June 14th. My question to you is, if you're John Fitch, do you know something the rest of us don't? Why sign with World Series of Fighting as opposed to signing with Bellator?
Ultimately, I think it might have been just the competition in the weight class. I think he felt, and it could have been money. I haven't read the terms or know what he got. He tweeted earlier he was holding up his contract for it. Uh, so I mean, like Aaron Simpson, those guys, they're really bringing over some heavy competition into the World Series. So I think ultimately that's probably where he went. And Bellator's more of a tournament style. They do matchups, they fight quickly, and I don't know if he's been used to the UFC, so I don't know if that was really his forte. If he really wanted to go back to try to prove uh, that he's a fight by either going through a tournament style or even having to take like King Mo, like King Mo did. I mean, look what happened to King Mo, right? So I think World Series of Fighting was more his style, and it's more probably closer to what the UFC does. So that's why he probably picked it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I hadn't really even thought about it that way. That's true. I mean, some guys maybe they just don't want to see themselves in a bracket.
Yeah.
You tune into the screen. You don't really know who you're fighting next necessarily. You kind of do, but I mean, you don't get the same kind of.
Right.
Maybe that's the thing. Like you said, World Series of Fighting is just straight ahead promotion. They just want to have fights between this guy or that guy. I mean, I'm really interested in the fight either way. But if Aaron Simpson wins, particularly, I don't think Aaron Simpson's ever fought Josh or John Fitch. So that makes two great wrestlers. It makes for a very interesting fight. So, I like pretty much what I'm seeing so far from World Series of Fighting. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, a huge bit of news in the world of MMA. Second guy, pretty much, who's cut from the same cloth. As the previous guy we talked about on the Podcage podcast. Mark the Hammer Coleman, the godfather of ground and pound, has retired. Sort of officially. I mean, he really hasn't been a super active fighter in recent years. So, give me your thoughts on the Hammer.
The Godfather ground and pound. I mean, he's won the UFC belt. He won Grand Prix. So, I mean, he really established himself back in the early days as being one of the top fighters in the world. And it was interesting because when he released that he was retiring, he just wished he could have gone back and done more by giving more. And I kind of thought that was interesting because he was saying he didn't give it at all, and he didn't give it what he could. But to me, man, he was one of the pioneers of this sport. I mean, he's won. I mean, he's beat some notable guys. I mean, he was in there. He's won the Grand Prix, won the UFC belt. So, I mean, I don't know much more what he could have done besides, being your typical athlete. You always think you could have done more, right? You think I should have done this or I should have done that. But my hat's off to him because I remember we were watching him back in the '90s. You and I fucking up at Shaw Air Force Base, represent baby, and we were watching that shit, and he was a fucking animal. I mean, it was great. I mean, the Severin fight and the Coleman. I mean, those two guys were fucking warriors, and when they stepped in the ring, that's exactly what they were. And my hat's off to them. I wish him well. I hope the surgery goes well. And rightfully so. He's a champion in my heart.
Well, my thoughts on Coleman are pretty much, in my early days of knowing about UFC, a buddy of mine who I'll give a shout out to right here, Mike Hosang, introduced me to it, and basically the way it worked was every so often before I started really heavily watching it, Mike would tell me, man, you got to see this guy Royce Gracie. He's little guy, Brazilian, choking guys out. The next time it was, man, you got to see Don Fry, man. Don Fry's the next big thing. Ken Shamrock, Oleg Taktarov. He always had a guy, And then when I started watching it, was right after he told me about Don Fry, and I was like, man, Don Fry, he kind of looked like Tom Selleck. He was in there just taking dudes out. He had good stand-up, solid wrestling. And then Coleman came in UFC 10, the tournament, and just took him apart.
Yeah.
He annihilated Don Fry. And the thing I'll never forget about Coleman was Coleman would take your back, in a sense, standing, and just come from underneath and just bring those uppercuts. And it's funny because the lasting images that I have of Coleman are his uppercuts to Fry, when Pete Williams kicked him in the head when I thought he was one of the best fighters in the world. He had lost to Maurice Smith. Pete Williams kicked him in the head. It just made him just crumble. And then when he fought Vovchanchin, the other one was when he got uppercutted by Shogun in UFC and just decimated. So those are my lasting images. And it was funny that it was like, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. When Coleman took those uppercuts to Shogun, it was almost like, man, you've kind of met the guy who's throwing uppercuts like you used to, and it's taking you out. But I mean, talking about Mark Coleman, you have to really respect that the guy really had, 2 acts in his play. Where not a lot of people get that. He had the first. He was an originator in UFC, and then once people had pretty much written him off. I mean, he lost to Maurice Smith, Pete Williams, Pedro Hizzo, all back to back in UFC. Then he went over to Pride, lost his first fight in Pride, and you're like thinking, okay, the guy's finished, and then he wins the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Least likely guy you thought was going to win the Grand Prix. I mean, he was kind of the Rocky Balboa of the Grand Prix. If you remember, he won it,
Yep.
and he kind of was in the ring, and he was beaten up a little bit. Tough fight with Vovchanchyn, held up the trophy, and it was a big moment for him in his career. And the other side of Mark Coleman is a guy that would fight anybody. I mean, he's been in there with Emelianenko a couple of times. He's been in there with Nogueira. He's fought Fry a couple of times. He's fought Crow Cop, fought Shogun, fought Bonner, fought Couture. He was on UFC the 100 card. I mean, he's a guy, man, that you can't tell the story of mixed martial arts without Mark Coleman. And there's a lot of guys.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't tell the story of mixed martial arts without Matt Hughes, but you really can't tell it without Mark Coleman because he was there at the beginning, the middle, and in a sense at the end. I mean, when you were at UFC 10 and you were at UFC 100 and you were at the Pride Grand Prix, those are 3 of the biggest events in the history of the UFC, and you played a major role in all 3 of them. I mean, I don't know the extent to which he played a role in UFC 100, but he won. Nice. So he really, man, he fought everybody that you would ever want him to fight, and yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a pioneer, and it's tough that now that he's retiring, a lot of stuff's coming out that his gym's kind of falling apart, and that doesn't really exist too much anymore. I mean, somebody I can't.
Are we gonna see Randy Couture go to his gym and pump it up a little bit?
You think that he's gonna be the first MMA rescue on Randy Couture's MMA rescue show?
He might be.
They have a history, and
yeah.
It'd be very interesting to see. So, again, I don't want to focus on the latter part of his career where he became a punching bag, but his career spanned a long time, man. To fight Couture in 2010, and to fight in like UFC 8.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a long career.
Yeah,
and,
that's crazy shit, man.
I actually met Mark Coleman once, man. I met him in Mandalay Bay, and good guy. He took a picture with me. Funny story about him was, I don't know what he's listed at, height-wise. Here's what I do know. We took the picture. You know how when you're in Mandalay Bay, it slopes when you're going into the to go see the fights. You have to kind of walk up a little ramp there.
Right.
He made sure that he was on the high end of the ramp. We'll leave it that way. When we took the picture, I started on the high end of the ramp, so and we had to switch, and I was on the low end of the ramp, and he was on the high. So I always thought they listed him at 6 foot or so, but he's probably closer to my height, maybe a little shorter. But tough guy, man, tough as nails. Just one of those guys where you just knew that someday he was going to have problems physically just because of the way he fought, but he was a fucking warrior, and he always showed up. I don't remember too many times where he kind of called out of fights, and I think he was supposed to fight Couture when they were both more so in their prime, and that never happened. They kind of took care of business at the end of their careers. But
right, yep.
Again, man, hats off to the Hammer. Hell of a career, and thanks for the memories.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so let's get on to the business of finishing strong before we do a 2-hour podcast here. So, although one thing I do want to tell fans, and even you, I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast recently when Jimmy Smith was on from Bellator, which is interesting. I got to give Rogan a lot of respect for bringing him on, because those guys are kind of cut from the same cloth. And if you want to learn about mixed martial arts and you really don't know too much, you're new into it, maybe you're a young guy, or even if you're an older guy like me who's been following it for a while, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast with Jimmy Smith, because those guys will take your ass to school, man. They'll put you in a desk and they'll go right up to the chalkboard and show you what's what. I mean, they were talking about Muay Thai. They were really – and Jimmy Smith is a guy who I didn't know a whole lot about other than Bellator, and he's got a pretty storied career in terms of fighting and some of the things he's exposed himself to. Yep. So, he's not a prolific guy necessarily in terms of who he's fought, but he's done a lot of things. What's your experience with Jimmy Smith?
I mean, yeah, I mean, he's super knowledgeable. I mean, just like you said, those two can school anybody in the world on some MMA and fighting and history. I mean, those two. Listen, I wish that podcast would have never ended because you shot it to me. I think yesterday or today. You told me, "Hey, you got to watch this," and I was listening. You don't want. I was taking notes and listening to it and trying to concentrate because that was some spitting some knowledge. I mean, and you're right. Jimmy wasn't an outstanding fighter, but he has enough knowledge. He put himself in situations that have an everlasting memory, and it brings you that knowledge just straight up front. It was absolutely an intelligent conversation, and it was great.
And one of my favorite parts is they were talking about Muay Thai, which I have a great interest in, even though it's something I haven't really delved into too much. I've always loved it. And Jimmy Smith was talking about the leg kicks, and he was saying, those guys are on such another level that if you're going to get in there with a Muay Thai guy, you have to make a decision. I'm either going to take this or I'm going to quit, and it's going to suck, and I'm going to have to if I want to. And he said he never gave in to kicks in a Muay Thai match, and it really tells you like the most interesting thing Joe Rogan said lately. I listened to his podcast talking to somebody else. I don't think it was Jimmy Smith, but he said, and this kind of goes to the point of Muay Thai, and I don't want to get off too much of a rant here because we need to be strong, but the interesting thing that Rogan said was, he goes, not that many people want to get in a fight. A lot of people want to kick somebody's ass, but not that many people really want to get into a fight. Getting into a fight is a lot different than kicking somebody's ass. And that's kind of what Jimmy Smith, that's what I thought when the two of them were talking. When you go into Muay Thai with a guy that's trained in Muay Thai, and you're just a guy that's kind of wanting to get into Muay Thai, you're going to take a fucking beating, and it's going to tell you a lot about who you are as a man. And that the fact that Jimmy Smith never tapped to those kind of kicks, tells me a lot about him. All right, okay, so check that out on Joe Rogan's podcast, fans, when you get the chance. All right, I'm going to finish strong right now, and then we'll get to yours. My finish strong is I would like to, and I've really been doing some research for this guy lately, and it's got me on his tip, and I'm going to go ahead and make my statement right now. I would like to make a statement right now proclaiming one Vanderlei the Axe Murderer Silva, and I'm going to write a long-form article about this in the coming weeks. I think he's the greatest fighter of all time. And what I mean by that is not that he's the most storied MMA fighter ever, or that he's had the best career, or any of that. What I mean by Vanderlei Silva is the one thing that people say in MMA, and it's a very overused term, but Vanderlei Silva truly lives up to it, is kill or be killed. And Vanderlei Silva goes in there. If you got into a fight with Vanderlei Silva when he was 60 years old, he's swinging windmill hooks at you. That's just how he fights. That's how he, and he's going in there to take you out or to be taken out. So in terms of a fighter, that's the one thing that I have the most respect for Vanderlei Silva in, is he still fights that way, and he doesn't have to prove a fucking thing. He's in Cooperstown already. He's done everything that he needs to do to be remembered as a legend. And when he goes in there with a guy like Brian Stann, he's still swinging for the fences. That's how he fights. It's in him. And that's why it scares me, because a guy like him may not know when to hang it up, because he knows he's going to go in there and go to war every time. And he still has the desire to do it. He wants it. I said in my article that I wrote about him saving the 205-pound division, I want to see him fight Chael Sonnen. I want to see him fight, who's the other guy that I was saying that he wants to fight? Vitor Belfort. I want to see these fights because he still has it in the tank, man. And even if he doesn't, I ended that article by saying one simple thing. Vanderlei Silva is going to go until the tank is empty. And when the tank's empty, you can bet your ass that the gas pedal is going to be on the floor if Vanderlei Silva's driving it. So I'm telling you, man, in terms of a fighter, all these things that we give guys credit for, man, all these guys that we think just have all this heart and balls and iron chins and they'll go for days and all the superlatives that we throw at guys, Vanderlei Silva's been doing it for 15 years. And he's going to do it until it's time to, until someone drags him from the octagon. So that's my plea and my stance that Vanderlei Silva is the greatest fighter of all time. So that to me finishing strong.
That's pretty interesting how you came across that. I mean, you're definitely right on point. So it's an arguable point. So I liked your finish strong today.
You're up.
Mine is about one Nick Diaz. And to the fans that I'm seeing on Twitter, seeing on blogs, websites, talking mad shit about how this guy is the worst person in the world. Listen, to enter the mind of one Diaz, and the one we saw during the conference is something special. Yeah, it was a little bit out of place, but we're talking about a kid. I don't know his full background, and I don't see him talking about his childhood or something like that. But we ultimately got to see somebody that speaks the truth, and that is a true fighter, and that has a game that's well rounded, and that brings the fight all the time. So just back the fuck up. Leave him alone. He hasn't done anything. He talks a few shit. Yeah, he all he wants to do is fight. He wants to fight the greatest in the world, and that's what he's doing in 2 weeks. So why don't you just fucking back the fuck up and let this kid fight? With Dana pushing him, I mean, you're not going to change him. We all saw the reality of what he sees, and he's just out there. So my plea is to everybody is just to take what it's worth, really look at that conference call again, and look into a mind of a person that we really haven't got to know, and see what he's really about. And when that door closes to the fucking octagon and these two guys battled out, we might see one of the great fights of all time. And doing that, I want you to watch the fight with an open mind, not for GSP to kill him or Diaz to kill GSP. That's not what it's about, like he said. These two fucking fighters are great fighters. They're going to bring a great fucking fight. So watch it with an open mind, and I guarantee you when you do that, you might just say Diaz is either the next champion or a champion in his own outright.
Yeah, that's a great point. You've established that you're pulling for Nick, and with all he may gain a lot of respect.
Yeah,
this weekend, depending.
And if he doesn't win, I'm not so weird, because listen, I don't dislike GSP because I think he's one of the greatest athletes of the fucking walking planet Earth right now. I mean, he's just something special. He's a fucking freak in a good way, right? And I wouldn't be disappointed if he won either. But listen, I am kind of pulling for Diaz, but I think that this might be one of the fights that we'll be telling our grandchildren about. This very well could be a fight, because it could be a 5-rounder. That when these two dudes fucking end the fight, they both might be carried off on a fucking stretcher. Who knows? So I just want people to fucking watch it with an open mind, and really see them as two fighters, and not base it off of hatred.
I agree, and again, we're going to get into the fight more on next week's podcast. We're going to try and have Adam Martin, who is actually covering the fight. So it may get a little tricky, because I don't know that when I talked to Adam on Twitter about coming on the show, and that was pre him getting the announcement that he will be covering the fight for Sportsnet in Canada. So I don't know if we'll be able to have him on, but we're going to try.
Good for him. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, it was awesome. So we'll see if we can get him on, hopefully. So a lot to talk about next time. We're going to talk about, again, all the comings and goings in the UFC, Bellator, World Series of Fighting. We're really going to step up our Invicta game as well, because the women's MMA is really getting serious. We got a couple of girls that we're looking to have on prior to the next Invicta fight. So we're going to be getting that in the weeks coming. Again, follow us at The Hot Cage Daily. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com, The Hot Cage Daily. And follow CageWall. Go to CageWall.com. And as always, for TJ Craig, this is John Franklin saying, keep your chin down, your hands up. Hot Cage Podcast.